Hello and welcome back to everyone that's tuning into the American Ultra Stock. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you guys tuning in for this one as we review the roster that was called up for to hopefully lift another Nations League. Pochettino came up with a 23 man that he thinks are good enough for the job. We're gonna go position by position, starting with the goalkeepers. We mentioned in the past we're a little bit short there, not short in quantity but in quality certainly. And he came up with Patrick Schulte from the Crew, Zach Steffen, a resurgence there, and Matt Turner. He seems to like Steffen. Your thoughts on it, and who do you think will be the number one? I think we all know who it is, but who would you start as a number one then, Braden?
Yeah, I think I was spot on when we did the roster prediction. I think Turner and Schulte kind of picked themselves, and then Stefan, Poch seems to like him. To his credit, he just had an incredible game for the Rapids, 12 saves. He's been statistically the best goalkeeper in MLS through 4 or 5 games. However, I think it's been 4 games in the league so far. Small sample size, but he started the season off in good form, and at least there's that, because last season he was actually, I think, statistically the worst goalkeeper in MLS, but at least he's starting the season on a positive. I don't think he'll play regardless, but it doesn't really matter who the second and third keepers are, unless Turner gets injured or something, or maybe he has like some crazy disciplinary issue, which doesn't seem in character at all for him. He's going to be the number one. He's going to start. I probably would start him in general. I think some people would probably say Schulte just because he's younger. Maybe he has a little bit more potential. Honestly, I just think Schulte is a younger version of Turner, to be honest. And even if he does have more potential, we need to be winning these games regardless. It's a bare minimum, I think, to be winning our, domestic trophies in CONCACAF. Not really domestic, but all of the trophies within CONCACAF, we need to be winning, which means we have to play our best 11 regardless. So Matt Turner should be the number one. No real complaints with the goalkeepers called up, especially since Diego Cochin is with the U20s. If maybe he wasn't released for the U20s, I would rather have him here, but he's where he belongs. Hopefully he can be with the U20s for the remainder of the cycle.
Absolutely. I mean, they kind of pick themselves, even though none of them are particularly great. But yeah, those are the guys that he trusts, and I can't really disagree with those. So now we'll move on to the fullbacks. 3 fullbacks. You called it on the roster prediction. And we have Fossey, who I think you mentioned as well, Scally and Jedi. Scally and Jedi, they're a given, really. I think they're solidified USMNT caliber players. And Fossey gets included. Were you surprised by his inclusion? Would you have gone with 4 fullbacks, or considering the depth of the versatility of the other players we have further down the pitch, you think 3 is just enough?
Yeah, I'm off to a pretty good start because I think I'm 6 for 6 for players who I thought that Poch would call up. I predicted Fossey. I mean, Scally and Jedi, there's no need to even talk about them, right? Because they picked themselves. They're going to be starting, especially since Serginho Dest, despite being back for PSV, Poch didn't seem to have the presence of mind to put him on the provisional squad. So therefore, he's not in the USMNT roster. It's fine. He'll be back for Gold Cup. It is what it is. Scally's reliable, if not a little bit just standard, traditional. He's okay. Right back, Fossey, like I said in the prediction video, is there because we need cover on both sides. Poch doesn't really trust our fullbacks, to be honest, the pool that we have. And Tolkien just got back from injury, actually. I don't even think he played yet, but he was on the bench this weekend for Holstein Kiel, first time since February. So it's good for him there. But Fossey makes it because Scally does have the ability to play left back if something were to go wrong for Jedi. We also have one of our center backs, Austin Trusty. Remains to be seen whether he'll get replaced or not, because he actually has been injured for Celtics. So we'll see what that happens in the next couple of days. But if he does remain on the roster, he can play left back. He's done it in the past. So it's another option there. Ultimately, Poch has even had a camp, I think actually last camp it was, where he only called up the 2 fullbacks, no backups. So even having one backup here is, I guess, more than enough by his standards. And I think it should be fine because usually they play the full 90 anyway. They don't really get subbed. We know we have a bunch of players who can play at the fullback positions anyway, like McKennie, Weah, Musa. So I think it's fine. I think you made the right call here.
Yeah, basically everyone has played right back at one point. But yeah, I agree with you. It's nice to see Fossey being included. Jedi and Scally. I mean, Jedi is one of the best fullbacks in the world. Scally has never really costed us. I think he was all right when he plays for us. That seems to be his standard, so I'm fine with those. Moving on to the center back position. Oh, and I just wanted to say props to Poch for not rushing, I think, Token and Des especially into the roster. I think we don't really need them. We should have enough to go through these matches without them. Moving on right here to the center backs. You mentioned Trusty. I was actually surprised that he got included here. He comes up partnered with CCV from Celtic. We have Mackenzie, Tim Ring, who I'm a little surprised still gets included, but hey, it's all right. Chris Richards. And do you think, and Mark McKenzie, obviously, do you think that Richards and McKenzie will be the standard center back pairing duo going forward, or do you think he's going to stick with Ring? Thoughts on the center backs? Anyone that you think kind of got hard done by with this call up?
Yeah, I think everyone can tell that McKenzie and Richards are far and away our two best center backs, and there really should be no circumstance in which they're not starting together. Sadly, I don't think they will. I don't know which one of them is going to be preferred over the other, but I just have a hard time seeing Poch not starting Tim Ream, seeing that he's basically been a locked-in starter the entire time Poch has been at the helm as the captain. And I mean, I guess it's fair. He's the best leader. He's the captain. It makes sense to have the captain on the pitch, but at the end of the day, ability has to take precedent. We have other players who are capable of being the captain. We've seen McKennie captain Juve. We've seen Pulisic be the captain of the U.S. so many times. Adams was our captain at the World Cup. We have Jedi Robinson, who's been captaining Fulham. There's just so many other players who are clearly able to have the armbands, and I just don't think we should be sacrificing so much ability because the drop down now, I mean, maybe if it was last year or 2 years ago, we wouldn't be saying this, but the drop down now from McKenzie and Richards to Ream is pretty significant. Maybe it won't cost us here because it is CONCACAF and we're not playing necessarily the strongest of nations, but further down the line, if this continues to be the case, especially going into 2026, I think it could be a problem. So I hope this is the first camp where we can see McKenzie and Richards as a solidified duo in both games. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not. In terms of the overall roster, I think it's fine. I mean, maybe you can argue Noakai Banks deserved a shout because he's kind of broken into the first team with Augsburg. Again, Trusty could still be replaced. So if he is, maybe it would be Banks because honestly, looking at the other options, there really isn't any. And even Miles Robinson as well. He actually just came off with an injury in FC Cincinnati's game over the weekend in the first half. So if one or two of them gets replaced, maybe Noakai Banks is the one to get his first USMNT call-up. The other options aren't really great if you look at the provisional roster. But overall, just based on the options that were available, I think it's the right five. Did we need five? I don't know. But I don't think it's worth it to complain about any of these, really.
Yeah, him calling up five, I think something makes me think that at some point he has a game plan in which he would use three at the back. That's the only thing that I can think of, really. But I agree with you. I would be honestly defending that it should be McKenzie and Richards, bar an injury, really, at this point. But I don't know how much he values result over it because I think longevity-wise, I think Ring should really get any minutes unless it's at the end of the game. But I can kind of see what he's doing if he wants to still integrate him into the squad and then later down the line start acclimating McKenzie and Richards as the duel. Whether or not these are knockout games and he probably wants the chemistry to be there, I don't know. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't really see it. I think it'll be hard to see the preferred starting in duo, really. I think it'll be Ream and Richards. But now we move on to the midfield where we have a surprise, actually. Johnny Cardozo, as per sources, he's going to prefer to take care of a minor injury. It's such an unfortunate moment, really. I don't know the depth of the injury, but he's going to stay at Betis for the time being. So it remains to be seen who's going to come in for him. But the ones that did call up beside him were Tyler Adams, Diego Luna, Weston McKennie, Gio Reyna, and Tanner Tessman. Obviously, Musa is in the roster as well, but he gets pushed into the forwards by USSF by some reason. But thoughts on this midfield group, and who do you think is going to get the call up, and who would you call up for Johnny's spot? Obviously, I think now it's just Adams and Tanner Tessman really as the sixes on this group.
Yeah, it's a very interesting midfield because with Johnny, there would have been 3 sixes, which is kind of a lot. And then there would have really only been 1 8 since Poch has this inexplicable determination to use Yunus Musa as a winger. I don't understand it. He's really just not effective at all. I mean, if you've been watching Milan, especially in their last game, he had a horrific missed chance. Luckily, it didn't come back to bite them because Christian Pulisic came to the rescue as always, but I just don't see it with this guy as a winger. I think he's useful as a midfield player. He's especially in the defensive aspect of the game, but as a winger, I just don't see it, to be honest. For the midfield, I think Adams and Tessman are more than enough as a 6. I think the beauty of our depth now is that there's actually a lot of options that you can use to replace Johnny Cardoso. If you want to go with a 6, there's players like Aiden Morris, even Emeka Anelli, who impressed at the January Camp Cupcake, and he's been doing pretty well for Real Salt Lake, got an assist the other day. You have traditional number 8s like Paxton Aronson, who's been having an incredible season with Utrecht and somehow still doesn't get a look by Poch. A little bit inexplicable there. Gianluca Busio, who has been pretty much out of form with Venezia, but it has to be said, he's been pretty much a regular under Poch with USMNT. And I will say, regardless of his form at Venezia, he has played well under Poch with the USMNT. I think every time he's stepped on the pitch, he's been a bright spot. So that could be another option. You also have players like Luca De La Torre, other number 10s like Brendan Aronson could come in. Alejandro Zendejas personally would be my pick. We'll get more into the forwards, but if you look at the winger room that we have, it's just really lackluster. I mean, it's just Pulisic and Weah, and then Musa, who's I don't even think is a winger. Personally, what I would do is move Musa back to the midfield. He can be that other number 8 with McKennie. Probably not start, but coming off the bench, since he is so versatile, having him as a bench option affords so many options later in the game, whether you want him as a winger, as an 8, as a 6, even as a fullback. I think he's a useful utility player to have. Then you bring in Zendejas, so we have a true out-and-out backup winger who has been in incredible form. I think there's really no argument that if you look at the entire player pool, he's been on the best form of anyone with Club America to start this part of their season. He's been sensational, goal or assist in basically every game. It's been incredible. I really do think he deserves a chance. Obviously, I wouldn't be mad if it's one of the Aronson brothers or maybe even Busio, Morris. There's so many options, but personally, I think it should be Zendejas. As for the rest of midfield, I'm just excited to see Diego Luna finally get a chance with the A team, see what he can do with a little bit higher quality of players around him than what he had in Camp Cupcake, what he would have had in the Olympics if he had got picked, what he has had at RSL. He just had a great game for them over the weekend, scored his first goal of the season with a bullet header, also had a nice play that led to their first goal. I'm very excited. I think his stock skyrocketed in Poch when he got that broken nose, stayed on and got the assist. Hopefully we can see something like that again in this USMNT camp. I just hope he gets on the pitch, honestly, because Gio Reyna is a huge unknown these days due to his lack of form, all of his injuries. So it's a very intriguing midfield group. I'll be interested to see who Poch actually decides to start, but I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I know you made great arguments, and props to you for coming up with great arguments for every single guy there, but I'll just say my opinion. Paxton Aronson has to be, surely he has to be the replacement here. The guy has been in the form of his life, really. What has he done wrong in the past 2 years? I don't think he has done anything wrong, really. And looking at the other guys, some of the guys that got called up as well, not putting a knock on Luna. He's been on great form. You can only do so much with what's in front of you, but I think Paxton really deserves it, especially because of the roster configuration. Another 8 here, I think, would do the wonders for this group. And Poch has said in the past that in the wings is where he sees Musa's potential being maximized. I can kind of agree because he gives the ball a little bit less there. And if he is to lose the ball, it's going to hurt less if he's losing it in the wings as opposed to the midfield. So I don't know. I think that it should be Paxton, really. I think he got robbed, really, with this call-up. And anyways, we'll see what happens. But it's unfortunate for Johnny nonetheless. Wish him a very good recovery. And now we move on to the forwards, where Musa, for some reason, always finds himself by USSF when they release it. We have Patrick Agyemang. Honestly, props to him. He did really well with what he got. I think Poch really rewarded some of the guys from the Camp Cupcake. Luna, as you mentioned, that was really gritty of him, so I think he deserves it. But Patrick gets there. I think the physicality is something different. I mean, really different. You rarely find a guy as tall as him these days playing soccer. Pulisic, Captain America. Josh Sargent, who I think is going to be having probably his final chance, really, to be a starter without much competition, because then next time we have Brian White called up and Tim Weah. Brian White being in this roster is a little bit funny. Don't want to knock on the guy. Props to him. He made it. But thoughts on this group? And Haji Wright just came back scoring a hat trick. He's obviously not going to be there. But thoughts, and who would you start? Let's say Josh Sargent is having a really bad game. Would you put Patrick or Brian to replace him?
That's an interesting question. But just going back quickly to what you said about Paxton, I was just trying to be unbiased. I think everyone knows by now. I'm a huge Union fan. I love the Aronson brothers. I also think Paxton was snubbed from the roster. I just think unselfishly, Zendejas also was. I think it's kind of cruel that he misses out just because. I mean, maybe you could argue if he was doing what he was doing in MLS, I think he'd be on the roster. I think that's a fair statement to make. So I feel bad for him, especially due to the roster complexion. It's interesting because Pulisic and Weah are probably going to start. Maybe Musa does over one of them. I just can't see it. Maybe Pulisic even is at the 10. You have Weah on the left, Musa on the right. We've seen that under Poch in the last camp. And then Reyna just drops to the bench. Same with Luna. We'll see. Maybe they can be game changers. There's some options, but then again, if you do that, there's no backup wingers at all. So I'm very curious to see what he'll do. In terms of the strikers, this is the one thing that I am going to knock Poch for. He didn't even include Haji Wright in the provisional roster. And yes, I do understand he was injured for a couple months before that, and he just came back. This was his first start where he scored a hat trick for Coventry. Great performance. The goals were really well taken as well. It wasn't just like 3 tap-ins or 3 penalties. 2 of them were very nice. Another one was a calm penalty. He's doing very well. And yes, maybe I understand the argument you don't want to rush players back in, but I don't understand how you can include John Tolkien in the provisional list, knowing that he at the time was also injured. Maybe he can come back and make the roster, but not include Haji Wright there, or even Serginho Dest for that matter, who's one of our best players, bar none, when he's on the pitch and healthy. Especially looking at Balogun and Pepe both being out injured, even the possibility of Haji Wright on one leg would be better than Jordan Morris, who made the provisional roster. It's ridiculous to me. I don't think it's forgivable from Poch, and it could cost us, honestly, because Sargent is in decent form for Norwich, but as we all know, he hasn't scored a goal for the national team in 5 years, and it's pushing on 6 now. So he really needs to step up now. Ajimong and White, yeah, they've been in decent form over the last half a season in MLS, longer for Brian White, but again, it's MLS. They got called in based on Camp Cupcake performances against very mediocre teams. How much stock we really put into that? Having Haji would be a game changer here. We know he always delivers for the USMNT. It's just so unfortunate that he wasn't even given a chance. And even if one of them did get hurt and so a replacement had to be called in, it would probably have to be Jesus Ferreira or Brendan Vasquez because he wasn't even on the provisional squad. As for who I think should play, I think Sargent, it has to be his chance. This is his last chance because ideally we do have Balogun, Pepe, and Haji all healthy at the same time, and those are our 3 strikers. Honestly, I don't know. Honestly, it's Ajimong or White. Ajimong also just scored his first goal this season. White's been pretty good in MLS for what it's worth over the last 2 years. Who cares, honestly? If one of them plays, something's going wrong for the team. I'd probably lean Ajimong just because of his unique skill set. To be honest, I think Brian White is only here because that's who Luna played the assist to in Camp Cupcake, and he kind of just got brought along as a package deal. I'm happy for him, Union Youth Academy legend, but I don't think he should be here at all. It's a nice moment for him. It shows that you can keep working and still get your first call up, your first real call up at the age of 29. It's a nice story, but he probably shouldn't touch the pitch unless we're up big or down big, which hopefully we won't be. So I think it should be Sargent. Maybe Ajimong comes in as a super sub. To be fair, I think his physicality could give tired defenders some trouble. So maybe he'd be useful for that aspect. I'm not mad to see him here, to be honest. I think he has something unique, something like maybe Daryl DK would have back in his when he was healthy, all those 2 minutes that he was healthy in his career. But I think it's definitely an interesting striker room. I'm very curious to see what the comments think about my Haji Wright take, and who would you play, Ajimong or White? That's the real question in this camp, the pressing matter. Everyone needs an answer.
Yeah, and before we leave, I think you brought up really good points. Like you said, if any of them really see the pitch, it's either because we're just wasting time with a sub, anyways, it comes down to things are not going well if they have to see the pitch. But before we leave, I want to ask you this, because I also think this is a little bit of a dubious roster. I'm a lot more critical of it than a lot of people that I see. What would you grade this roster? What would you grade Poch's decision? 1 through 10, if you had to give it a rating, what would you say?
That's an interesting one. I think it's mostly positive. I'd probably go with like a B plus. I don't think there was too much to screw up here. I think maybe marginal things like a third goalkeeper, perhaps maybe Noah Kai Banks instead of one of the center backs, although that could still get rectified. Fullbacks are good. Midfield, he has a chance to fix his mistake by calling up either Paxton Aronson or Alejandro Zendejas. If he doesn't do either of those, then the roster grade probably goes down a little bit. But if he calls one of them up, even if it's someone else like Busio or Brendan Aronson, at least they've been regulars for the national team, and we know that they're at least reliable under Poch, maybe. So I don't have too much to complain about. The only real gripe I have is the Haji Wright thing, and I think that's really the only thing that's worth getting upset about. But other than that, it's fine. It should do the job, although I will say I personally have Canada as the winners of the Nations League. I'll just say that now. We'll make some videos later on previewing the semifinal and the final should we get there. Hopefully we'll beat Panama. I think we have enough to do so. But I think Canada should be the favorite based on the current squads. Not to say we don't have a chance, but I think we called up a decent enough roster to get the job done. I'm just a little bit unsure of whether that'll actually happen.
Yeah, I mean, will we beat Panama? Hopefully. They've gotten our number in the recent years. But yeah, it should do enough, hopefully, guys. And we're going to be uploading again. Sincere apologies for the lack of uploads, but thank you so much for sticking around. Thank you for watching the video, and I'm really curious to see what you guys think of this roster. Were you happy with it? Do you look at the guys that missed out on it? Do you think Poch made some? I think definitely on the list of possible players to be called up, that was a little bit criminal, to be honest, some of the names there. But ultimately, the final roster, we don't really have much of an issue with. But let us know in the comments below. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, share with your friends, and we'll see you next time.